Piano started in church. I went to a little Southern Baptist church growing up, and I remember always being fascinated watching the pianist play. And evidently, my mom was a pianist, and as soon as I could reach the keyboard, I would come home from church and play the hymns by ear. And I was maybe 2 or 3 years old, I think, at the time. And so my mother could recognize what I was doing. So I had distance lessons before anyone knew what distance lessons were. My mom had grown up in South Alabama in Troy, so she called her piano teacher, and I think basically said, my son's doing all this playing. So we started having lessons over the phone. And, of course, back then there were no cell phones. And so we found this enormously long phone cord. So on, I think it was Saturday nights, my mother would call Troy, and they would drag this phone cord 2 rooms away to come to the piano. And Ms. Irvin would teach me over the telephone. And when we would go visit my grandparents, I would have a little lesson, and I still remember her house vividly. And as soon as I entered 1st grade, she pretty much hand-selected the teacher in Birmingham, as that's where I grew up, that she wanted me to work with. And the rest was history. It's been a wonderful well over 45 years of playing the piano. And actually an English degree for my undergraduate degree, because I had a really hard time deciding what to do. Piano was always part of my life. I was always really successful in the competitions I was doing, but I think I had a hard time accepting that music was really what I was intended to do. And because I, was a relatively intelligent person, I went to an academic magnet school, so I was a high-achieving academic kid, but also practicing a lot. And in the end, I decided if I go into music, this is my last chance to do something different. So I decided to get an English degree. At one point, I was debating between being a high school English teacher, getting a PhD in comparative literature, or going on to get a DMA in music. Obviously, music won. Definitely a non-traditional approach, but I feel like in terms of my teaching, it's made me a stronger teacher because I feel the command of language that I developed as an English major certainly has translated into my teaching. I was seeking advice from everybody that I could find. And I had an English professor I really respected, so I asked him if I could go to lunch with him one day, because I just wanted to pick his brain about, what life as an English professor was like. So he basically said, Kevin, job market sucks for both. English jobs are not easy to get, music jobs are not easy to get. And he said, so when you're done with this terminal degree, do you want to be beating the bushes, trying to publish articles on obscure authors to get your name out to get a job? Or do you want to be beating the bushes trying to get concerts to get your name out to get a job? And that gave me a crystal clear view of what my future needed to look like. And I'm so grateful to him that he was able to pose that simple question that really put everything into perspective. MTNA is about a 17,000 member organization. We're largely independent piano teachers from all over the country, but also a lot of collegiate faculty and a lot of non-pianists as well are members. We provide services to the music teaching profession. In particular, we try to help independent teachers with a lot of their needs, offering discounts for things like payment processing, but also we offer lots of professional development. So we have a virtual conference coming up at the end of April, which I'll be pretty heavily involved in. And we also do our annual conference every year. And next year in Chicago will be our 150th anniversary. So that's a conference we're really looking forward to. The Grieg is probably the most popular piano concerto, and certainly arguably the most popular. I think it's been one of the most often recorded. It's one of the most often performed. I don't have the statistics right in front of me, but I looked a few years ago, and it was amazing how far ahead of a lot of the other piano concertos it was in frequency of performance. And I think it's because it is truly an evergreen piece. Grieg wrote it when he was, I think, 24. It was a fairly youthful work, but he kept coming back to it throughout his career and revising it pretty much until he died, and it's the final version that most of us play today. But you can feel the human existence, I think, in every note of that piece. It has a lot of youthful vigor in it. It's also got some of the most tender, gorgeous melodies that have ever been written. It has the drama and the excitement in the last movement, And what I feel most importantly is it's a collaborative concerto in the sense that every section of the orchestra gets a shining moment in the piece. It's not only well written for the piano, it's well written for the orchestra as well. And I think this is one of the reasons conductors like to tackle it, because everyone gets to shine. And especially woodwinds, brass, everybody gets great solo. Strings always get a nice feature. But also the piano just has some incredibly beautiful textures that integrate so beautifully into the orchestra in it. And there's no question the Mozart concertos are extraordinary, and he was incredibly innovative in how he approached opera concertos, and certainly the A major K488 I think also ranks way up on the scale of frequently performed pieces. But I think part of the difference is Mozart wrote over 25 concertos. Grieg wrote one. He actually did start a second one. It was going to be in B minor, and it has been, the sketches from it have been recorded. So in some ways I wish he had finished the second concerto. But I think one of the reasons it's so popular is it's so singular. And I think another reason the Grieg has become so popular is because in many ways a lot of people think it's inspired by the Schumann concerto. Schumann was also a one-hit wonder for piano concertos. And the Schumann opens with a big introduction in the piano. Grieg follows the exact same structure. So they're very much kind of sister pieces. I think you hear a lot of Schumann-esque influence in the Grieg, and they're often recorded together. And I think that's one of the reasons that they have both been very popular in the repertoire as well. And it's sometimes with orchestras, even they're programmed as well in the same concert. You know, we don't think about Scandinavian composers frequently enough. And Grieg was from Norway, and obviously a lot of the composers on this program, not everybody, but it's largely featuring a lot of Scandinavian music. And some of it's new to me too, so I'm really excited to hear what else is on the program. And I think, kudos to Adam Flatt for programming such an interesting program, because I've never seen the Grieg programmed quite the way he's approaching it here. And I think it's going to bring out it's going to highlight some of the beautiful aspects of the Grieg. Because what the Norwegian composers and the Scandinavian composers embraced was this sense of their culture. And they embraced the sense of folk music that came out of the culture. And like, for instance, in the last movement of the concerto, he imitates the Hardanger fiddle, that's a very famous string instrument that's played in folk bands in Norway. So I think this embracing of culture, rather than, obviously it's based in Western music and we have all the Western tonality, but I feel like a lot of these pieces, we're going to hear these folk-like elements. And to me, that's where the title of this concert comes from, this Hymns for Everyone. Because this idea of connecting to to folklore, to folk culture, is something that resonates with all of us. And Finlandia, as we all know, many of us have sung it in church because it's been turned into a hymn, even for us to sing within our culture. But I think even going back to the tone poem, as when Sibelius wrote it, it captures a feeling of that country that is so unique. And I think the Grieg does too. In the concerto, the second movement in particular, it opens with this gorgeous, expansive texture in the piano. And it has this sense of openness. And all I can imagine is standing on top of one of the mountains of Norway, looking out over the fjords. Because that's, to me, the sense that I get. And I'm a big Disney fan too, so I can't help but also think about Frozen and these sort of icy textures that we sometimes hear in this music. There's also a theme in the first movement of the concerto that to me sounds like little trolls. And I think it's full of contrast, and it's also full of heart, because I think this music comes from his heart. It's his reaction to his home country. And I think that's one of the reasons the piece resonates so beautifully with us. We all resonate with that sense of home. Best advice I can give anybody for this concert is come enjoy this gorgeous music. I think from first note to last, this concert is going to take you on a journey. And I think we're ending with the Grieg, if I remember right from the program order. And the end of this concerto, I think, is one of the most incredibly satisfying moments in music. It builds to this incredible climax where the orchestra and the piano are just sailing through the roof of the concert hall. And I think when you hear where the concert starts and where we end, I think you will not regret coming to invest in this music on Monday night.